Okay, here we go with part 4. It is looking like we're going to have 5 parts to this to break it up. This is a shot of a hallway, and it's submitted for the maximum depth of field. Well, the good news is we do have depth of field from the front end to the back end. So we've got depth of field satisfying the requirements. It's sharp here, sharp here, sharp everywhere. The only real issue is there a point here other than purely for the technical submission? There is an interesting abstraction going on, a play of colors with the cool colors here and the warm colors there. This might form an interesting shot if we could completely abstract it. The first thing we need to do is to straighten the lines in it. Some of them are already pretty straight. This part of the shot, as you can see from the guidelines, is really pretty straight. But this part is not. That's a common wide-angle distortion. So the first thing we're going to do is straighten that up. Now you've seen how we straighten horizons. We can straighten vertical lines the same way. But we do have a small problem here. Part of it's okay, or appears to be. So what do we do with just the part that needs straightening? Well, we just straighten that part, and we do that by just selecting it. So I'm going to pick a rectangular selection. And you can see that the door jamb is pretty much perfect. And I just want to straighten this part. So I'm going to do it the same way we did before. I'll go to Edit, Transform, Skew, and now I'm just going to pull this door jamb out to where it's straight. And that's all we need to do. We'll hit Enter to accept it. We can go up to Select Delete, or we can do a Control Command D to deselect. And there we are. One question would be, what about this door jamb? That really is square. There's an interesting illusion going on here, and you've got to be aware that sometimes, well, it is off just a little. Okay, we know that first part's straight. Now, if we want, we can straighten this part out. And Enter, Control D. We'll get rid of our guide. If you're ever curious about the power of visuals and leading lines, this to me looks off, but it's not. We just measured it. It's just fine. So it's fascinating the way straight lines can appear crooked if there are other things to influence them. But to make an abstract out of this, even something like that could simply play with shapes and tones, but it's really in some ways far too recognizable to work that very well. Maybe. Anyway, there is no real there. So we'll go ahead and move on. We have a nice dog picture. Friendly dog. But again, you guys really have to trust me on this. If you have a vertical subject, it is okay to turn your cameras vertically. Nothing, I promise you, nothing will fall out. We have such a strong vertical with this dog's face and neck and body that the shot really deserves to be pulled in on. So let's do that. He's looking straight at us, so we don't have much movement going on. Now we can get in and concentrate on the dog itself and do a little work with that. We might want to vignette this a little bit to make it stand out even more. And we could look at maybe putting a little more tone in this highlight area, but that's minor. It's otherwise really pretty well exposed. There is detail in this highlight. If you were doing this for real, there are some things in it that this side light is catching you might want to remove. Some stray hairs. They really belong there. They're hairs on the dog, but they're kind of distracting to look at. This one wild eyebrow that's coming out. We could easily use the spot healing brush. We'll make it a bit smaller since we're only dealing with the hair to get rid of those. And now we're not quite so distracted with all of these little loose hairs. Take the time to go over your shot and really see what might take your eye away from the main shot, which is these really pretty golden eyes. We have another little creek bed type of shot. We've got some interesting motion going on in this along the lines of the creek bed. Some interesting movement going up in this way. This is coming up. We know this is coming around, so we can deal with that. So overall, it's working pretty well. The only thing I might do is crop this just a touch. We've got some vignetting on here. That, I'm guessing, is your lens because of the color of it. It looks not dark blue, darker than the sky. It looks black, and I'm assuming that's a shadow from your lens. So let's see if we can help that a little bit. Let's get rid of that branch. We can take the rest of it out. Nice reflection in there. We probably want to keep most of that. And now I'll take my spot healing brush. Get rid of that. And now we're really concentrating on the movement. Now this line that flows up the creek and up this tree, or down it, depending on your point of view, really starts to work. The only issue with this, it's a maximum depth of field shot. The only issue is when you look in close, there's nothing sharp. We can give ourselves a clue by looking at the file info under the file menu. Go to camera data. And what we can see is this shot is an 1/8 of a second shot, which is a little more than most people can handhold. So you've gone down to f13 to try to get the depth of field, but an 1/8 of a second isn't going to cut it. You need to be on a tripod in order to pull this kind of shot off. Here's a nice little garden figure. Good use of selective focus. That part has worked really pretty well for you, but we've got a lot of distraction. We've got all of this that's really distracting you. This isn't too bad, although it is kind of taking you away from it. But this stuff, all of these little details that catch the eye are things that we really just need to get rid of. And again, this is simple crop because you've got a great exposure on the statue. That part is just fine. So if we come in, assuming the statue is the real point of view, if we come in here, and come in there, maybe we can take a little of this off. now we've got a much better shot where we're really concentrating on what we need. This is soft and out of focus, so that's fine. I would probably burn down this corner just a little bit, and I would do it in our normal way. Layer, new, layer. I'll go ahead with overlay, fill with gray. Now again, you can see the gray layer over here. I'm going to use a black brush with a fairly low opacity. And we'll make a big one. Remember, we're using the bracket keys to enlarge the brush. And I'm going to take that down just a touch. So now we can really look at that figurine and pay a little more attention to it. Wow, is this your personal yacht? That would be really cool, wouldn't it? Be able to invite a few hundred of your closest friends over for a little cruise around the city. Very nice. It'd be nice if you'd let him move just a hair more into the shot. But that's okay. We have a sense of what's there. Good use of depth of field. Interesting colors, this pastel, magenta, violet sky against the blue of the water. Very cool. It works really pretty well. Nicely done. I'm not sure there's anything I would do to this. I might burn down this building top just a little bit so it's not quite so blown out up on the top. But other than that, I think this works really pretty well. Well, here's an interesting shallow depth of field that shows off the pattern of raindrops on the window. This might have actually been better if you'd used more depth of field and all of these drops were sharp. But this is pretty cool. It's a good idea. It did certainly what you asked it to do. I might look to see if there is a better shot within that shot. And it's possible that something like that might be a little better, a little more interesting of a shot, where you can now start to work with those droplets. But this is pretty good. You did a nice job of the selective depth of field, so it certainly meets the requirements. The only problem, like I say, is all of this out of focus stuff here that I think we could get rid of. At least get a better sense of that. Maybe there. Yeah, it looks like Joshua Tree. Again, interesting light. Late light, bringing out the warm colors here. Good use of the sky. Deep depth of field shot. Nicely done. Nicely done. I might decide I'm going to bring the sky in just a little bit. Maybe to there. So that this tree becomes our primary focus. And now this starts to take on a new bit of importance in this. Then we can decide, do you want to take that sky down a bit? What would happen if we did that? What does that look like? So let's go to image, levels, and all I want to do is look and see if this sky were darker, does anything happen cool with it? Not really, just gets darker. We could take it down just a hair. So I'm going to cancel that. And I'm going to do it with our old friend, the multiply layer. And then drop the opacity back down to give us just a little bit more contrast so it's not quite so flat. We're only using, what do I have, 20% of that, but it's enough to make a difference in how it looks. Here's with nothing, there's with a 20% less exposure, and it just makes it snap a little better. Otherwise, nice job. Another shot out in the wilderness with our little car back behind it. Nice shallow depth of field. Good job of throwing the background out of focus. Even the back of these rocks along here is starting to go out of focus. That's good. So, what's our subject here? Well, it has to be the bush. Be really careful about foreground detail that is out of focus. If this were just the rock, it might not be so distracting. But with this shot, we can now see stuff down in the corner where it's really getting a little out of control. So that this rock is fine. But when we start seeing these elements, now it's beginning to be a problem. So maybe those have to go. This car is a little distracting in it. We might want to get rid of that too. Actually, there's a line of cars. There's more cars in here. So let's see if we can solve this all again with the crop. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but a lot of these shots that you guys have done have all contained a good image in them. That all we had to do to bring it out was just to get rid of some of the conflicting stuff. So now we can really concentrate on that little bush with its bright flowers. Now, let me show you how we can bring out some of that. I'm going to do it in 2 stages because I want to darken some stuff. I want to lighten and brighten some other stuff. So I'm going to make a duplicate layer so I can keep all of that. And the first thing I'm going to do is go down here on this bottom layer, and we're going to brighten those yellows. So I'm going to come in with my hue and saturation. I want just yellows. I want them to be a little more saturated and a little lighter. And I say, okay. Now what I can do is go back up to my background layer, make it a layer mask, use a small black brush, and I can brighten up those flowers so that they really stand out the way I would like them to. Now they really start to stand out. So now we've got that part done. We could either do a stamp visible, or we can just flatten it at this point. We've done all we need to with that. Again, we're going to make a duplicate layer. Now I'm going to darken some of this, so I'll use my multiply layer. Good, that's what I need. I need to do now a reverse or an inverted layer mask. So I'm holding down the Alt key, clicking on the layer mask. I need a white brush. Maybe a little much. Let me knock that down to about 25%. Use the bracket keys to make my brush bigger. I also need to make this soft again. Bring this down some so it's not quite so distracting. With each pass, it's darkening it a little bit where the brush is. Okay, now that bush stands out a little better than it did in the original. So these were just some easy tweaks we could do. I'm guessing this must be from the Art Institute. It's a nice use of angles and leading lines. An interesting contrast between the organic shapes of the tree and the really graphic, hard-edged, almost draftsman-like lines of the building itself. I think this is a nice shot for that. This line and broken area in there is a little bit problematic. So let's see if just with the slightest of tweaks we can solve that. Let me come in a little bit here. Oh, it is nice to have that whole word art in there, isn't it? Okay. All right, now there's not very much of that left. Take your time. Bring things down a little at a time. And this tends to work. It's a little stronger. Now, would it help if this blue was darker? I don't know. If it was much darker, we might lose all of this really light filigree branches in here. I think I would leave this. Interesting architectural arrangement in this shot. And good depth of field. Cool. So for this module, this will be our final shot, and it seems appropriate that we've got a locked-up skeleton in there. This is a fascinating gate, since it's hard to tell if there's anything that would stop you from going through here. But maybe it's to keep this guy out, and he's from getting out, rather, and he's been there a long time. Okay? And we're looking through a fence. In this case, that minimal depth of field, where we've got some of this fence in the foreground, and then a second layer of fencing, and then our skeleton, is really interesting, and the sign is what helps it all. I don't think there's much over here that is helping us a lot. This is a nice leading line, but I don't think we need all of it. So let's take a little of it away. Now, by bringing this down, I want you to see something over here. These two lines of the front fence form really an arrow point that points out of the image. But when we get rid of that top line, we now have a line that is pointing down towards the skeleton. So we've made that a little bit stronger as it points towards our little guy here. Maybe we can bring this in just a touch. Okay. Now we've got all of these strong lines leading up. You did a really good job putting him inside this out of focus set of links in the fence. Interesting. Very cool. Clever concept too, by the way. Okay, so this is our last shot of this module. We'll get this up and posted and get this polished off before too long.